technology. Isn't it phenomenal? You can send a text message across the entire globe. I have probably 10 different pieces of technology that I'm using right now to record this video. You know how this is done without the use of just a computer, a rotten, disgusting computer, something that, used to be easily defined. It's a grouping of logic gates and transistors. And this isn't that interesting, actually, the more that I talk about it, because everyone knows what technology is. It's around us all the time. We hardly even live in a real world anymore, as much as we live in a world that's had cyberspace grown all over it like a fungus. You can't go anywhere without cyberspace being involved in some part of your day. And that, along with the sort of rise of AI and just the conversations around that, have made people start to think about consciousness within machines, and not just weird tech nerds who, think that circuitry is attractive, but rather like people genuinely asking the question if a machine, and specifically a machine powered with AI thoughts, could be sentient. And I am going to say, quite sincerely, robots cannot be conscious. Simply put. And I'm gonna be basing this around a couple of things, namely this book, Loren Eiseley's The Invisible Pyramid. This book, Technology as Symptom and Dream, by Robert D. Romanyshyn, I believe is how you say that. Romanyshyn, probably not. And also Frankenstein. And through those works, I'm hoping to be able to have an explanation for why technology, more specifically AI, is incapable of like a true human consciousness. Because I'm sick of hearing about it. And they, no, they can't. Why would a robot be able to think like you or me? It's ridiculous. But I'm not going to do like the YouTube video essay thing where I explain in detail what each of these books is about. They're amazing. You should read them. I think that would be good if you're interested in these sort of things. I also will preface, I have a book about AGI. I haven't read it. I understand like the basic concept of AGI, but I also don't think that is consciousness. I think that's just more mechanics, more robot stuff. It's a synthesis of imagination at best, but what it's doing is incapable of being true imagination. But let's start out. I'm going to attempt to illustrate these ideas to you, using the power of crude drawings. So let's just get into that. So this is a human, right? They're pretty cool. They're hanging out. And around the human is all of this mist. The human's hanging out right here at the edge of the mist, and they're looking out into it. And in that mist, they can see things like the outline of an animal, and they can look at that long enough and say, oh, what's that? Oh, it's a deer. And they define that. That's this is a deer. That shape is a deer, and that gets passed down through time with oration and myth and things that surround what a deer is, both like in reality and within the context of being a human. And so that's the most raw, basic experience of being a human, is like defining what you see and um, being able to kind of imagine outward those concepts. It's our defining unique trait, you would say, is that we don't evolve into specialization features. There aren't, delineations of humans with longer hands because it was better for them for grasping at like the highest fruit in the tree. We all kind of just have good hands for grabbing things in trees. The thing that we do have specialized that is sort of also incapable of being specialized is our brains. So we exist, basically as like a mechanism, to use some of to use the AI concepts, at a root level. A human sees something and then they define what it is. That's a flower. And a robot is also doing this. There's another flower. This is the robot flower that the robot sees. And so for a lot of people at a base level, this is the same. The robot is thinking, the robot is capable of analyzing things and extrapolating things. So certainly, if this were to continue, at some point, the robot would have what is like considered a consciousness. But that's not the case. A robot is incapable of having a consciousness in the same way that a human has a consciousness, because that original human from earlier, you might remember that what was around them, it wasn't just deer and trees, it was mist. It was an indefinable space. Okay. It was an indefinable space. So a robot, here's the robot again, doesn't have that. There's no undefined space to a robot, because a robot knows what everything is. It's, the mist is not a mist. It's like points of abstraction, perhaps. Noise, maybe, is how the robot would interpret it. A digital haze, but it's not mist. Mist is things that are truly unknowable. A robot has no unknowable thing. And this is why a robot cannot be conscious, all right? Because it's the unknowing that is what drives human experience. So here's another human. They are aware of the mist. So it's in their head, right? Oh, goodness. That's apt, though. It's sprouting, and it sprouts into reality in some way. Actually, this is perfect. The mist is kind of going right over their eyes. So like the reality, we'll do some flowers, another silhouette of a deer, or like a crummy attempt at one, cave drawing. We're aware of those things as they exist in front of us. I can look in the room that I'm in and tell you all of the stuff that's in it. But there's elements of how these things got here. What are their history? What do they mean outside of just what they are? And these are all like things that humans contend with, the philosophical and like metaphysical questions about things. And it's because of that, because the mist still exists within the mind, and because we have not defined every single thing that is around us, that we have consciousness, that we have like a drive to continue to know more. When a human is born, right, it's a linear experience, and it's through this linear experience that like you define the world around you, but you also have eternal questions about what that world means. As Loren Eiseley puts it in The Invisible Pyramid, we have no living fossils around ourselves, save for primates that are not capable of speech yet. So we have nothing to look back on in the modern day and say this is what this is what came before us. This is the humanoid creature that comes directly predating humans, and we can dissect it, or we can investigate it in some way that will, gain insight into how humans came to be. It's like this is the link. That's this is what people talk about, the missing link, right? There's a human. What a lovely fella. But they're confused. Here's a different human. I guess the machine didn't like that one. Here's a different human. Also a lovely fella. But they're confused because they're wondering, where did I come from? Where did I come from? And this is like the eternal question, right? We're all always wondering this. Where did we come from? And a robot doesn't have that experience. A robot knows from the moment it's born everything before it. Like a robot is not doesn't have to deal with that problem. It just knows. It's like, I know the face of my creator. We do not know the face of our creator. That's like why religion exists. That's why we're always asking questions about what happens after we die. Where were we before we were born in a metaphysical, spiritual sense? There's scientific answers to these questions, which would just be like, you are born and you do die, and there is no, greater context to any of that. And we, can extrapolate with Darwinian evolution theory and the primates that are around us, that at some point we were like them, but our brains underwent a specific development that allowed us to evolve out of specialization, like I said earlier, and begin to perceive the mist and define the mist and look for the flowers and the deer in the mist. And it's sort of this history of defining the undefined and keeping those definitions constant, that we do have our consciousness. Star Trek would call this like the curiosity of humanity. That's what the Q are interested in humanity for in Star Trek, is that they're never satisfied to any ends. They just want to continue to grow, like their knowledge of everything around them. A robot might want to grow its knowledge of the things that are around it. A robot may, look for answers where there are not yet answers and be able to think externally or something. But at its root, it cannot be conscious. You look at Frankenstein. This is a creature, Frankenstein's monster, the wretch. You look at that creature, and I think it's volume 2 of Frankenstein, where the creature is lamenting about its life. It speaks of, being aware of its existence kind of in full from the moment of its conception. Its body was fully developed, and it had no memory of a past that is this sort of root feature of humanity. So, if anything, Frankenstein, as he's written in that chapter, sort of represents a robot born with consciousness. It would be confused, assuming that we have like programmed in it some way to value humanity, which I presume if you were going to program consciousness into a machine, you would have it value humanity. You would make sure that that was deep in the programming. And, maybe that becomes the robot's eternal question, is why do I value these objectively inefficient material objects that die in front of me and that have no that seem to wander aimlessly with no understanding of where they came from, versus me, the enlightened machine who has been able to see every moment of history leading up to my inception, and every decision that was made, every change in code, every hardware upgrade through some, omniscient understanding of all history that these sentient robots that people talk about always seem to have, it would have none of these questions. And without these questions, what is sentience? What is consciousness? It would be a confusing and sad and angry existence where you would know you existed and potentially even know why you existed, but you wouldn't you wouldn't ever think to question that stuff. It's just known to you. If you were born as a baby, just being like, I exist and here's why, and there's no questions to these things, then we would never have anything, no disagreements, no imagination, no moving forward. I'm gonna specifically grab one paragraph out of here to end this on. But so again, I'm reading here from Technology as Symptom and Dream. I think that this book perfectly illustrates the sort of like anthropological discussion around technology in the same way that someone like Loren Eiseley does. And I think that we are living currently at a stage of technology where looking at it anthropologically seems to be essential. So to close out my rambling in the basement, technology is a crisis of the imagination. As such, technology is both a danger and an opportunity with respect to the imagination. It is a danger insofar as it can be the death of imagination through its literalization. It is an opportunity insofar as it can be an awakening to how the events of the world have an imaginal depth, and how the life of imagination inscribes itself within the events of the world. Do not let the idea of robot consciousness kill imagination, literalize everything, because that's what it does. It takes something that could be conceptual, something you could mull over, something you could think about, and it literalizes it. It looks at the mist, and it only sees water vapor and the sky. And you look at the mist, and you imagine things. And you define things through that imagination and the shapes that you see. And with that, I bid thee adieu.